is it that makes Utah unique? Is it the fact that you'll find a national forest in every county, in spite of the fact that Utah is the second driest state? Is it Utah's bizarre liquor laws? Or the fact that Utah falls right in the middle of the Jello Belt, and Utahns are the largest consumers of Jello? Maybe it's the natural beauty you'll find in its 5 national parks. Or its 7 national monuments. And 3 national recreation areas. Some people are absolutely positive that Utahns have a unique accent. Is that true? Well, before answering that question, let me ask you to think about the person closest to you that has an accent, someone you know intimately. When asked this question, most people think about a friend or family member from another part of the U.S. or from another country. But the real answer should be, you. You have an accent. I have an accent. Everyone has an accent. An accent is just a particular way of speaking. Even people who use sign language have their own way of signing. We usually think that having an accent means speaking in a different way somehow, but different from who? For most people, the answer is people who speak different from the way they speak. Now, I'm positive that South Africans listening to a Utahn would definitely think that the Utahn has an accent. A New Yorker would too. So just who are we comparing Utahn speech to measure how different they are? One good starting place is the western United States. Do Utahns speak differently than other residents of the West? Well, the problem of comparison rears its ugly head again since there are many different accents in the western U.S. People from Colorado will swear they can tell a Coloradoan from a New Mexican any day. And Californians are pretty sure that it's the Idaho folks that talk funny, not them. Another issue is what part of Utahn speech are we looking at? Accent usually refers to the pronunciation a person uses, while dialect includes pronunciation, but also includes variations in things like grammar and word choice. These are factors we'll need to keep in mind as well. So, where can we go to look for an answer about whether Utahns have a different accent or dialect? If you ask people what makes up a Utah dialect, people will tell you all sorts of stuff. I asked a group of people what Utahns say different, and one man said, Utahns say store-boughten cake, not store-bought cake. A Utahn responded that she'd lived her entire life in the state and had never heard the term. This highlights one problem with looking for differences. Not everyone in Utah uses the same words, nor speaks with the same lilt, so which Utahns are you going to use for your comparisons? Another issue is what I call the different means unique effect. To illustrate this concept, consider the use of the term toilet papering to refer to the annoying act of covering the trees and bushes in someone's yard with toilet paper, a common teenage prank. Toilet papering isn't the only term for this quasi-vandalistic practice. The Dialects of American English survey indicates that the use of toilet papering rather than rolling, wrapping, TPing, and so on is more common in the shaded areas of this map. Now, when a person from an unshaded area travels to or interacts with a person from Utah, a state that falls into the shaded area, and that person hears a Utahn use the term toilet papering, they correctly observe that this particular vocabulary item exists in Utah. The problem is that people from other areas often fall prey to the different means unique effect. This happens when they go a step further and incorrectly assume that because they have never heard the term except from a Utahn, it must exist in Utah and Utah alone. This is a fairly common phenomenon. For instance, one journalist provides 3 examples of this error in a newspaper article. He cites the fact that in Utah, caramel or caramel is given 2 syllables rather than 3. Yet, this pronunciation with 2 syllables is common throughout the country. Look at where the red dots are located. Another case he discusses is dropping the R in library, so it's pronounced library. The internet is full of people decrying this pronunciation without specifically mentioning Utah. Just Google library pronunciation. Now, the month of February has suffered the same R-dropping fate, yet few Americans fail to drop the first R in casual conversation. The most common pronunciation is February, not February. We seem to be averse to having two R's so close to each other in words like library and February. Finally, the journalist pegs pronouncing ing as on Utahns. Seriously? If there's something that occurs to some extent in every single English speaker in every area of the globe across the centuries, it is this. These sorts of generalizations happen when people base their conclusions on random observations and anecdotes. In order to really understand what's going on with the English of Utah, we need to move beyond personal anecdotes and random observations. We need to get systematic. We need to get scientific. We need to approach the issue like a linguist. So, I teamed up with my colleague, Wendy Baker-Smimo, to devise an experiment to see if we could really distinguish Utahns from non-Utahns. We recorded Utahns and non-Utahns from other western states reading a passage like this. Then, we cut their recording into sentences. We asked other people to listen to the sentences and judge how strong of a Utah accent the person had on a scale of 1 to 5. Now, some of the listeners were Utahns, others were Westerners, and others were from other non-West parts of the country. Here's what we found. Listeners from Utah could tell a Utahn from a non-Utahn. Westerners could also distinguish Utahns, but non-Westerners couldn't distinguish Utahns from other Westerners. The non-Westerners just perceived a Western accent in all of the Westerners, Utahns and non-Utahns alike. This is good evidence that Utahns have a unique way of speaking, but there's some issues with the results. For example, men, regardless of whether they were from Utah or not, were perceived as being from Utah. The same thing happened for the age of the speaker. Older speakers got higher Utah ratings, and that included older Utahns and older non-Utahns. Now that makes me wonder if people think that the Utah accent is more prevalent in older speakers and men. Okay, so people could hear Utah accent, but exactly what was it that they based their ratings on? Well, we examined the sentences and found that the pronunciation of certain words was highly related to high Utah ratings. 3 things stood out. The first is what we call the fail-fel merger. It happens when the vowels a and e are both pronounced e before an L sound. The fail-fel merger makes the pronunciation of these words identical: bell, mel, gel, and sell. I'm going to the post office to get the mail. I've got a 99 Mazda for sale. My car got damaged in the big hailstorm. The second has to do with the feel-fill merger. Here the vowels E and I are both pronounced I before L sounds. That makes these words have the same pronunciation: dill, mill, pill, sill, and will. So we silled the dill with a handshake. Can you pill those potatoes for me? Turn the steering wheel to the left. The third pronunciation people attended to has to do with intrusive consonants. These are sounds that creep into words. For a lot of people, the word strength is pronounced with a K sound that works its way in between the G and Th sounds. Many English speakers introduce a P into words like hamster and warmth. What the listeners in this study perceived as Utahn is the use of intrusive T in words like Hansen and also, pronouncing them Hansen and also. In a later episode, I'm going to talk about all these characteristics in more detail, and we'll see that they are not limited to the Beehive State, but are quite common across the country. So what we've learned so far is that there is such thing as a Utah accent, and that Utahns and listeners from Western states could hear it, but the speakers who were not from the West couldn't distinguish it. We also saw 3 characteristics of English. But these are based on people's perceptions alone, and we need to make sure that their perceptions match reality. I'll discuss this in later episodes along with many more possible characteristics of Utah English.